Hello folks, I'm Alex. This is Alex Unabridged. Welcome or welcome back to the channel if that is the case. Yes, so it's time for Short Story Roulette episode 1 today. I introduced this little series in my most recent ramble video, but I'll give you a quick rundown on what it's all about in case you didn't watch that. So basically I've got a ton of unread anthologies, short story collections, things like that on my shelves. And I really need to make some progress getting through them. I really want to read more short stories, especially now I'm publishing and writing short stories, and I just want to get through some of the stuff that's on my shelves. But one of the problems for me is that when I have that much choice, I get choice paralysis when I try to decide what to read. So I'm gamifying things a little bit so that I don't have to do the decision making. So I've got all of the books entered into a spinning wheel on wheelofnames.com. So a spin of the wheel gets me the title of the collection or anthology, and then I roll some dice or a die, whichever I need, to get the number of the story in that particular collection. I'm going to pick 3 at a time, and then when I've read those 3, I can hop on and make a little video to chat about them, and then pick 3 more. And this will go on as long as I'm enjoying it, basically. We'll see how many I can get through. But right now it's a really good time to kind of start and get through quite a few, because it is Short Story Summer, which is an event all about reading short stories in August. If you've not come across the event, I will put links, details, etc. in the description down below, so you can check that out for yourself and check out some of the folks doing Short Story Summer, hosting Short Story Summer. Check out some of their sort of videos on short stories too. So let's dive into the first 3 that I picked in that previous video, and then after that we'll pick 3 more for my next trio of shorts. So the first one then was from this book, Madame Krell's Ghost and Other Stories by Sheridan Le Fanu, and it was the story Ultor De Lacy. Ultor De Lacy, A Legend of Capacullen. So this one, this is kind of a story of sort of historical, generational sort of trauma, revenge, with kind of folkloric elements, ghostly elements, supernatural stuff, basically. She's set in Ireland following a Jacobite revolution in the 17th century, and the story centres on Ultor De Lacy, who's an Irish aristocrat. He's lost his fortune, title, influence, etc. By fighting against the English. He's, treasonous essentially. And he lives between sort of Europe and Ireland, kind of avoiding the authorities. But holed up in Ireland, near the ruined sort of ancestral estate of Capacullen Castle, are his 2 daughters, Alice and Una. And there's a dark history to Capacullen. It's steeped in local legend, particularly regarding a nearby haunted tower on the estate, and sort of a supernatural entity that's tied to the family's ancestry. Alice, the eldest of the 2 daughters, is quite practical, grounded. She's destined for a life in a convent as a nun, but the younger daughter, Una, is the opposite, basically, quite flighty in some respects, romantic definitely, more delicate, and kind of very much drawn to these kind of mysterious happenings that are going on at their home on this estate, this ruined estate. And Ultor himself, when he is there, he's grumpy, he's kind of consumed by the loss of his legacy, his titles, etc., his status, and he's kind of blinded by vengeance, and he fails to notice the sort of immediate danger that is threatening his family, his daughters. And well, as you would expect, things don't end well. So yeah, this one surprised me, because this is, certainly in terms of the language, I don't do so well with some classics in terms of language. I find them much more difficult to read. And this is the first Sheridan Le Fanu story that I've read out of here. And yeah, it's I thought, oh, am I going to get tripped up by the language? and I didn't. I actually really enjoyed it. I think that's what I enjoyed most about it. I like the story. It's not necessarily my kind of story, on the whole, but it was, kind of, the atmosphere of the story was really good. There was kind of a sort of a steady dread that built throughout. The sort of the spectre, the entity that's at work in this is definitely creepy, and kind of what's behind it, that kind of thing, and the outcome of its kind of machinations. And yeah, it's broken up really nicely, actually, this into kind of very short chapters, which I just kind of find helps me a little bit, kind of gives me points to kind of stop and think, and not analyze, but just kind of go back and sort of get my grounding with that section that I've just read. It's a good steady pace, and it builds slowly. But as I say, I think it was the language that I actually was surprised more than anything else that I enjoyed a lot. It's of its time in terms of the structure, the way that it's written. There are lots and lots of run-on sentences. Lots and lots of punctuation. Even just the first paragraph, which I'll read a little bit of, is it's one long sentence basically. In my youth, I heard a great many Irish family traditions, more or less of a supernatural character, some of them very peculiar, and all, to a child at least, highly interesting. One of these I will now relate, though the translation took hold type from oral narrative, with all the aids of animated human voice and countenance, and the appropriate mise-en-scène of the old-fashioned parlour fireside and its listening circle of excited faces, and, outside, the wintry blast and the moan of leafless boughs, with the occasional rattle of the clumsy old window frame behind shutter and curtain as the blast swept by, is at best a trying one. So yeah, the second part of that is just all one sentence with just a ton of punctuation in. So usually that would frustrate me, but maybe it's because I've kind of got a bit more au fait with, kind of different sentence structures, and kind of been studying it a bit more because I've been editing, that actually I'm starting to enjoy actually picking apart the construct of sentences, things like that. Nerdy, I know. But, I actually quite enjoy looking at the technical elements of the writing, if you like, in this, because there is quite a lot, as I say, there's quite a lot of that in this. But there's also I enjoy some of the language. I had to look up a few words, so it's helped my vocabulary. Things like vicissitudes, which is an excellent word, which I shall obviously now be trying to crowbar into various sentences. It also used one of my favourite words ever, behoove. And yeah, it behooved the young ladies to flit. I do quite like that. So as I say, the language kind of drew me in, because not necessarily in a kind of atmospheric way, but actually it drew me in a technical way, if that makes sense. But it drew me in no matter what, and that's kind of a really good thing for me with this sort of writing. As I say, it's this is the sort of stuff that previously I have struggled with, and I didn't struggle with that at all. And I'm sure there will be other pieces in the future that I'll read that are, more challenging, etc. But even kind of sort of accessible, sort of classic language, language used at this time in terms of the sort of writing. So we're talking mid 19th century. I would have struggled with, and I didn't with that, and that was a lovely surprise. So yeah, I'm actually looking forward to reading more Le Fanu, and more stuff from that era as well, and see what I make of some other stuff. So next up then is something out of this, Nightmare Hour, by R.L. Stine. So this is a collection again of sort of, I guess, I don't know, middle grade YA, I guess. Certainly aimed at a younger audience, and not adult stuff. And the one that I read out of here was a story called I'm Not Martin, which the title illustration is quite creepy. So I did kind of go into this going, oh God, what's this going to be about? And yeah, this was short and sweet. And as I say, it's written for a younger audience, so very easy to read, very quick to read, very accessible. Good, quick pace. And yeah, whilst it is horror for a younger audience, I will say that the ending was enough to scare me. It's essentially, it follows a boy called Sean who has to go into hospital to have his tonsils out, and he's, understandably quite nervous about going into hospital, but he's also kind of pissed off that he's got to go in on Halloween because he loves Halloween, and it's his favourite night of the year, and he's gonna have to miss out on all of the cool Halloween stuff. So he's kind of, trapped between being scared of the hospital but also just annoyed at the fact that it's Halloween. And he has to share a room with another boy whilst he's waiting for his surgery. And there's something up with this boy, basically. More than just, what you'd expect somebody to be in hospital for. And yeah, it taps into that kind of, general fear of hospitals that I think everybody has. It's not just kids. All of us, it's not a nice experience having to go into hospital for an operation. And so, yeah, it tackles that really nicely. Also tackles kind of the fear of not being believed, and also a lack of bodily autonomy. And I think that's where, like, for me, it was kind of, it's more scary. But yeah, it really, as I say, I won't say too much on this because it's very short. I don't want to spoil it. But like, yeah, it was a good, fun, like it took me about 10 minutes to read it, I think, something like that. Really good, fun, sort of breaking my day just to go, I'm going to go and read that one. And I sat down 10 minutes later, and it's kind of a nice thing to have with a brew. Nice thing to read with a brew and a biscuit. So yeah, very much enjoyed that. I'm looking forward to more in that book. Those will be nice quick breaks that I can have. So the final one then was from this book, The Birds by Daphne Du Maurier. And it was The Birds, of course, and I was very excited when the roulette wheel and the dice spit that one out, because I've had this on my shelf for quite a while. I think my sister bought me this lovely edition, I think last Christmas, and it sat there and it's kept winking at me, and I've not got around to reading anything out of it, despite really wanting to read The Birds. But it's a bit of a longer short story, so I kind of wanted to have time to kind of sort of properly take it in, because I've heard so many great things about it. In fact, I was a little nervous going into it in case it had been a bit overhyped, because I've had that with other kind of classic short stories or novellas or novels, etc. And whilst I've kind of read things that I've kind of gone, oh yeah, that's really good, they've not lived up to the sort of hype level. But I'm happy to say with this one, I had nothing to worry about. The hype is deserved. But yes, so it's very, very good to finally get to this one. So this is set in post-war Cornwall, rural part of England, and tells the story of an unexplained violent uprising of birds, essentially. The main character, this is Nat, who we kind of see everything through Nat's eyes, if you like. And he's a part-time farm labourer. He was injured badly during the war, so he works part-time on a local farm and lives in a small coastal cottage with his wife and two young children. And one day he notices a real sudden change in the weather, a sudden unnatural cold snap driven by an east wind. And he notices that the local birds are kind of acting quite strangely. They're gathering in large numbers. And that night, there's an attack on his cottage, just small birds attack, like blue tits, finches, robins, things like that. They attack him, they peck his hands and face, and then they get into his kid's bedroom. And then the next day, the hostility increases quite rapidly. Flocks of seabirds, land birds, birds of prey start to get involved, and kind of working together, where you wouldn't get species kind of cohabiting or working together. Generally, they're all working together. Nat realises the danger and fortifies his cottage, boarding up windows, blocking chimneys, trying to stock up on fuel or taking stock of what he's got. He tries to warn other people, like his employer, Mr. Trigg the farmer, and neighbours, but they kind of dismiss him, you know. And then as the tide turns again and as night falls, it becomes a full-scale attack on Britain, and we hear stuff from the BBC broadcast, it's a national emergency broadcast. But then the radio goes quiet after that, and they're kind of left, Nat and his family are kind of left to try and, find supplies from the farm, figure out what they're going to do, boards, try and put more boards on the windows, etc. And, it kind of survive for as long as they can, basically. So yeah, it's very different to the Hitchcock in a lot of ways. I love the Hitchcock film. It's one of my favourite horror films. But it's very different feel. This like the setting for this is, it's much more grounded. It's much more kind of, it feels much more like a grounded, realistic sort of atmosphere rather than sort of a more stylized kind of spectacle that you get with the film, I would say. As I say, love the film, no criticism against the film, but this is quite different, feels quite different. And it's far, far more than just a simple kind of creature feature with like cool / scary bird attacks. It's a complex story. It's deeply rooted in its historical context of post-World War II Britain, and the rising fear of what's going to happen in the context of the Cold War as well. I think like the terror of it, and it is a really quite an affecting piece. Is like, it's not actually, it doesn't come from the attacks themselves, although they are very well written and they're really good, really good to read. I think the terror with the birds comes from like the kind of the waiting, the watching, this as I say, this kind of collaboration amongst species. It's kind of the ominous kind of feeling about what's going to happen next, how are things going to escalate. That's kind of more creepy than the attacks. There's a couple of passages that I marked. What he had thought at first to be the white caps of the waves were gulls. Hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands. They rose and fell in the trough of the seas, heads to the wind, like a mighty fleet at anchor, waiting on the tide. To eastward and to the west, the gulls were there. They stretched as far as his eye could reach, in close formation, line upon line. Had the sea been still, they would have covered the bay like a white cloud, head to head, body packed to body. Only the east wind, whipping the sea to the breakers, hid them from the shore. So yeah, just this idea of this massive army, essentially, of gulls. And gulls are vicious. And anybody who's spent any time near the seaside knows gulls are vicious. So things like that, where they're waiting, and like, where was the other one? He stepped into the garden, and as he did so, he saw the living birds. The gulls had gone to ride the sea, as they had done before. They sought seafood and the buoyancy of the tide before they returned to the attack. Not so the land birds. They waited and watched. Nat saw them, on the hedgerows, on the soil, crowded in the trees, outside in the field, line upon line of birds, all still, doing nothing. Yeah, that kind of like that, and that's one of the bits from the film actually that I will kind of reference, is the bit where they all alight on the climbing frames at the school. You get kind of shots that pull away and there's a few more birds, go back and there's a few more birds, pull away and you go back and there's loads more birds. That idea of them sitting and amassing, waiting, it's like those are the bits that gives me goosebumps, and like those are bits that I find that are really well done in this. It's this element of waiting, of knowing that it's going to ramp up again, but until it does, there's just this looming threat. I think like the setting of it generally, like the cottage, this kind of domestic setting, which is meant to be kind of, safety, etc. It's, home is, your symbol of warmth, and certainly like in a cozy rural cottage, it's like it's a very particular sort of setting. And to switch that into a kind of a really kind of claustrophobic environment, you know, where they kind of have to move everybody into one room and board all the windows, and it becomes this kind of this kind of dark space. You know, it's like the windows that are meant to be given light have got to be blacked out and boarded over, and you know, kind of it destroys this kind of like safe domestic space and just becomes this kind of bunker, essentially. I think, like, you can see the parallels between, you know, the certainly the aerial bombardment of the birds and sort of the very close memory of the Blitz. I mean, this was written in 52, I think, 1952. So, you know, Du Maurier is drawing heavily on that kind of that national trauma of the aerial bombings. And as well as these, as I say, these early Cold War fears of sudden kind of unstoppable destruction. Like Nat himself as a character, I think is a great character. He's you know, he was injured during the war. It talks about Plymouth, which was devastated during World War II. And his response to this new threat of the birds is shaped by that experience. You know, his instinct to board up the windows, fill cracks, stop up the chimneys, stockpile, you know, or at least stock up on rations, or, you know, kind of supplies, establish some sort of kind of, you know, rotation for sleeping with his family and stuff like that. Routine, you know, mirrors those kind of like wartime routines of air raids. You know, the birds themselves acting like these kind of bombers. They're using, you know, the tide and wind patterns to kind of time their raids, if you like. It's got kind of like a precision to it. And, you know, when it comes to the Cold War kind of side of things and the anxieties that are building and sort of this kind of the idea that the total collapse of infrastructure, you know, the dread of kind of an apocalyptic level kind of destruction, and the fact there's nothing the government can do to protect you against things like that. It really does kind of look at sort of the fragility of that kind of society, and especially when you're out in rural areas, and like rural areas like Cornwall have always historically been less catered for, if you like, by, you know, national government. They are out on a limb, they still are, and you're even more detached there, you're even more isolated. So yeah, it's like it really, all of this really adds to this sense of like dread in it. Yeah, I absolutely love this. I think like the way that the characters are great, the atmosphere is great, the way that it looks at this fall of, you know, society, this failure of society, and the impact that that's going to have on humanity from this attack, this random attack. And I love the fact as well that like Du Maurier doesn't try and explain the attack, what's causing this. It's not about that. It's about the fact that this thing has come out of nowhere and nobody knows how to deal with it. Plus there's this kind of, you know, arrogant assumption that as humans we are top dog and that we can beat anything, especially some birds. You know, it's kind of like it's just nature is birds. Like the farmer Trig, Nat's boss, you know, sort of says like, oh, you know, come with us, we're gonna have a shooting party, you know, he's got his guns out and stuff. It's like, you know, feathers will fly, and it's like and you know, it's like this idea that oh, it's just a load of birds, oh, we can take them, we're people, we're top of the food chain. Yeah, all of the different parts that work in with this are really well done, and it just makes for such a rich story. And it is creepy, it is bleak, and it's kind of unsettling, and it feels very real in terms of its setting and its characters. It's like, yes, it's a phenomenal story. So yeah, I will definitely be rereading that several times. So there we go. Those are the first three very enjoyable short stories to start off with, three very different short stories to start off with. So the next three then I have, as I did last time, done the spinning of the wheel and throwing of the dice just before I have come on camera to do this. I haven't looked at what the stories are yet. I've got the books here, so I'll ping backwards and forwards between me of an hour ago and me now, whilst we sort out the next three. So, okay, first up then is Unnatural Creatures, which has 16 stories in it. So use D20. That's story 13. So the first one then is from this book, Unnatural Creatures, and it is story number 13, which is contents. A story called The Complete Werewolf, which is by... That annoys me when they don't put the author's name in the contents. Anthony Boucher. Boucher? I have no idea. But yes, that one. Some nice little illustrations in this book as well. So yes, so that's the first one. Have no idea about the author or the story. Obviously it's going to be a werewolf story. But yeah, that excellent werewolf story, always good. Okay, number 2. Second pick then is Cornish Horrors. That's a British Library one, and that has 15 stories in it. So that'll be another D20 roll. Story 8. Okay, so that is from this collection, Cornish Horrors, Tales from the Land's End, edited by Joan Passy. And this is one of the British Library Tales of the Weird collections. I think this is a great series. So, story number 8, it is in here, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. A story called The Baronet's Craze by Mrs. H.L. Cox. Not a writer I have ever heard of. Originally published in Tinsley's magazine in 1889. So, yeah, we'll just give that one a go. Nice to have another Cornish story, another story set in Cornwall after the birds. That's a nice little kind of continuation. Some Cornish stuff. So excellent. We'll give that one a go. And then, okay, number 3. Okay, last pick. Oh, Books of Blood, volumes 1 to 3 that will be. And that has 15 stories in it. Again, so another D20. Story 1. Okay, so number 3 then is the Clive Barker, and that's on my iPad, so it's here. And so it is story number 1, and this is a reread, I have to say. I have read this before, but not for a long time. So story 1 is in volume 1, obviously, and yes, it is. It's The Book of Blood is the first one, so that'll be good. Something I've read before, but not for many years. A bit of Clive Barker. I do like Clive Barker. I've not read any Barker in a while, so it'd be nice to get back into his stuff. So there we go. Those are the 3. We've got a werewolf story, we've got some more Cornish horror, and some Barker horror, which is always interesting. So there we go. That's it for today. Thank you very much for watching, as always. Do drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do let me know if you've read any of the stories I've talked about today, or if you've read any of the stories that are in my next batch that I will be getting to next. I will be back with episode 2 of Short Story Roulette within the next 2 weeks, I think. I'm going to try and do it every couple of weeks, but it might be next week if I get through them sooner than that. But we'll see. But from me, for now, that's ta-ra.